Gentlemen, this is the Three Body Problem. We've made it to episode 25. I think you should give ourselves a big round of applause. We've made it to episode 25. This is episode 25. Juanito is traveling this week, up very early in Seattle
sucks, man.
for the podcast. Probably the first time in his life he's up at 8 a.m. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I'm underslept. I'm tired. It's cold. I took a red eye over here last night. So, being up at 6:30 to read blogs is a bit rough, but I'm happy to be here, guys.
For the folks just listening and not watching, he's wearing a very, very prominent Google does not care about you t-shirt. I don't know what's the message there, but maybe we'll get into it. Checking in from Bucharest, Romania, pondering the future of democracy in his country. We have Costin, Raiu. How are you, my friend?
I'm good. I don't know if you see me that I'm wearing a t-shirt which says game over.
Oh.
To go well with the Google doesn't care about you.
This is uncoordinated.
And going perfectly with your Romanian election situation. Since we last spoke, you were going to have this runoff with the two other candidates. Now I've heard the entire election has been cancelled altogether. Just kind of fill us in from where we ended last week to where we are now.
Well, yeah, like as the election started abroad for all Romanians, the Supreme Constitutional Court decided just to stop it. They stopped counting the votes, they stopped receiving the votes, and they canceled the whole thing. They canceled the first round of elections, they canceled the second round of elections, and then the president came to the national TV and said, like, guys, it's canceled, it's over. And don't worry, I'm not going anywhere. And everyone was like, that's exactly why we're worried. But yeah, the plan is that in 5-6 months, they'll have new elections. And I suspect that the people who went right now in the second round will not be present again. They'll be replaced with
I'll
others.
be in a gulag somewhere.
But Costin, on a serious note, this means that the Russians have already won, right? Like the Russians can actually have a documented case of someone canceling their elections because they didn't like the result. Isn't that a fair assessment of where things are?
It's a very fair, sad, brutal assessment of how it looks like from here. A lot of people were saying that, you should have just let the elections play, and the only way to kill fire is to kill it with fire. Like to send back the devil back to hell, you need to send it the same way it came, through the will of the people. Otherwise, it will never disappear. It will be forever like a stain on the Romanian democracy.
Juan, you disagree? You don't think the Russians have won already?
No, I mean, it depends on what the goal is, right? Like, yes, in a sense, you could say they won in that they've disrupted a democratic process and potentially shaken up a people's faith in that democratic process. However,
that's a big dub, though.
But there's a worse scenario. The worst scenario is you do install your puppet president who is pro-Russian and gonna, do whatever the fuck it is they actually want in order to weaken the country as a whole, its independence, its sovereignty, its ability to function as a country on its own. And if the options you present before me, which I'm not saying are the only ones, but if the options you're presenting me with are, I have to postpone an election. Here's assuming they're going to do it, right? Like it doesn't turn into autocracy under the current president. But you postpone the election, but you do have the election in some secure fashion in 6 months. Yes, that's a temporary shakeup, and you can say, wow, the Russians really fucked with us. But in theory, you end up with an actual government that cares about Romania, that the Romanian people chose, as opposed to powering through it for the great ideal of democracy and ending up with somebody who's going to tear those social institutions from the inside out. I'll take the delay. I don't think that's the ultimate win, right? You don't end up with Tulsi Gabbard as head as the fucking intelligence community in Romania.
Costin, what's the mood on the ground? Like, give me a sense of what
blessed thing, sweet summer child.
The general mood on the ground there is in keeping with what Juan said. People felt like you dodged a bullet. You don't mind this 6 month, kick the can down the road for 6 months until we figure out this thing. And then we still have to get to the TikTok part. Like what happens between now and then?
The dancing.
What happens? Yeah, what happens between now and then? I saw a note, Washington Post actually covered it in detail. Joe Mann, shout out to our friend Joe Mann. But he mentioned there at the European Parliament hearing last week, there was a suggestion that TikTok could be violating the Digital Services Act by failing to mitigate election propaganda. And this is relevant because Romania is a NATO member and a member of the EU since 2007. Like what happens if TikTok is to blame here and TikTok misinformation and this very, very sustained thing? Are they mitigating that heading into whenever the election is?
Well, first of all, just to address something that Juan was saying, the presidential elections are separate from the parliamentary elections, right? So those, however, were allegedly not affected. So those got validated. So separate from the presidential elections, the other elections were okay. They weren't affected by the Russian propaganda, although we need to mention the fact that the new party, which just appeared, which supports the same candidate, got 6% of the votes. So some people are saying, listen, if we cancel the presidential elections because of interference, how about the elections that happened in the middle, between the first and the second round, in which this party that is clearly supporting the same candidate got 6% of the votes? Shouldn't we cancel those elections as well? But for some reason, yeah, they decided to cancel only the presidential elections, not the other ones, because I think there's enough votes for a number of parties to form a majority. And with that majority, let's say they can organize elections again in a fair manner. Now, if you ask me, the issue is that, like, what if the next time the same thing happens? There's like the third round, they start from scratch, and what do you know? Again, the pro-Russian candidate wins. Like,
Right.
what do? You cancel it again? Like,
Yeah, that's my point. That's my point about the Russians already won. I mean, they've forced a democratic institution to throw all notion of democracy out the window in the interest of the state. No.
It's not all notion though, man. Like here's what I'll say. Like at some point, I don't know anything about Romanian law. I don't know anything about, but like there was supposed to be a notion of qualifying as a candidate to be president, right? Like even in the US, right? Like you have to be a certain age and like blah, blah.
Correct.
And like we've thrown all conventions out the window, but there was a reason for that, right? Like the notion was we can't all go apeshit and decide like we're going to hire a really charming 22-year-old, very, good looking, charming, charismatic human being is going to be our president, right? Like you wanted to set some standards. I think to some extent, I don't know what's going to happen over the next 6 months, but if you were to show me an investigation by the Romanian IC and judiciary and whatever that shows that this candidate not only was we're treating this as if the Russians picked a random human being and they threw all their weight behind them in order to interfere with the election, and that person had nothing to do with what happened, which is that's where you go, hey, you're fucking with a legitimate election, but if in the next 4 months you can show me that this person took money, colluded, met with the Russians, had anything to do with the influence campaign that you're saying delegitimizes this process, then the point is not that you have to cancel the election, it's that you need to fucking charge this person or remove them from the running, and then you can run the election just fine the way that you were doing before. I think the point here is, had they just chosen like the Green Party candidate who's like a total loser and was never going to win and just fucked with the balance of the election, you can say this is wonky, but it's a legitimate candidate. They had nothing to do with this. It's just weird. But in this case, it's like if the plan was to install a, puppet president that's totally in cahoots with the Russians and is actually in cahoots with the Russians, right? He's met with them, he's coordinated with them, he has anything to do with this campaign. That's just a person you disqualify from your fucking elections, and then you run your election just fine. right? Like that, it's all about how they play this and what you can prove and what you can show about this particular candidate. But it is something treasonous to be in cahoots with a foreign government in order to subvert an election. So why would that person still be in the running and in the ballot in 6 months?
What happens with TikTok between now and 6 months? Are they going to ban it? Are they going to remove it? What's the, like, how do we avoid a
well,
repeat of this just happening again in 6 months?
if you ask me, this situation is extremely convenient for a lot of people because it helps advance a lot of agendas. So it will definitely help whoever wants to ban TikTok because it kind of proves that TikTok can change the outcome of elections. There's no moderation going on. There's no safeguards against election interference. So for sure, I think it plays in a lot of agendas. So I suspect TikTok will be banned or limited or restricted, maybe even banned during the period of the elections or perhaps 2 weeks before the elections or something like that. What is interesting, by the way, is that all these candidates that were extremely popular and active on TikTok, they're now all of them on X. So they've super exploded. Like Călin Georgescu created an official X account a week ago or so, and now he's starting to gather a lot of followers on X. So the whole activity from TikTok is now moving to X. So even if they ban TikTok, there's still X. And now the question is, of course, how many people actually watch X and how many actually believe in that. But again, it's it's like the old problem. It reminds me of doping in athletics.
Yeah.
People, just take all these steroids, and then here comes WADA or whoever and say like, no, these are forbidden. So
Yeah.
then like a new formula is invented, and that works until they say this is forbidden as well. So a new formula is invented, so on and so on forever.
I
And
can't shake.
whoever wins is the one who has the best formulas that nobody can catch.
I can't shake the feeling that someone doesn't like the result of an election, so they cancel it, and then
That's what it
That's
is.
what we're
That's
that's
what
what we're
it is.
used to. That's what the three of us grew up with in slightly different
That's exactly why I
configurations
can't
at
shake the
slightly
feeling.
different times. Yeah, and look, there's a reason why democracy is such a flimsy and
Experiment.
problematic thing. It is, right? Like I think the whole point of it is um, the power of democracy, the same way as the power of the free market. And this isn't like a pro-America rant. Like it's about um, the implicit compliance that comes with saying we have a vested interest in this thing, right? Like it's my choice, and therefore it doesn't matter whether it's a good choice or a bad choice. What you have is the stability of a people who don't feel the need to like burn the whole place down because something is being forced upon them from the top down. But it's a terrible system. It's very easy to manipulate, particularly in the age of surveillance capitalism. And I like, look, my problem here is that I think the politicians are being particularly ineffective because we're obsessing over TikTok, and the problem isn't really TikTok. The problem is micro targeting. That's the issue that has come up with all of surveillance, the surveillance economy, surveillance capitalism, and all of the problems we have had, whether it's with like COVID, anti vaxxer narratives, and all this other bullshit. We've always had advertising, we've always had propaganda, but before, you needed to show the same message to everyone at the same time to some capacity. You could try to, maybe we'll put one message on Fox News and the other message on MSNBC, but you're hitting whole swaths of the population and you can't control who hears the message. If I tune into Fox News tomorrow and I hear your other version of reality, I'm like, wow, okay, well, this is fucking weird and distorted. But like, you can't control whether I see it or not. What happens with the ad economy and all this ad bullshit of the enshedification of the internet over the past like 10 or 15 years is that the ad mechanisms created the ability to micro target in a racial, a socioeconomic, a common interest capacity that allows you to create ad hoc groups of people at any given moment with no relation whatsoever. and say, I am going to feed a different narrative to each one of these groups that appeals to them and has no there's no consistent logic between what I show, African Americans in Detroit versus what I show Hispanics in Florida versus what I show, rich older people in Denver. And like none of these narratives fit together at all, but nobody outside of those circles is really seeing them. And I can just weave these propaganda bullshit stories for all these people whom it appeals to the most. And that's the thing. The ads mechanisms that were created over the past 15 years have created this complete dissonance in society where cognitive dissonance is the motto, because at no point do you really see those things bleed into the wrong groups. So it's not TikTok, it's TikTok, it's Instagram, it's Google ads, it's YouTube, it's everything that allows me to weave propaganda narratives that only go to specifically targeted groups. And that's a harder thing because then you have to fight the ads economy, which is what the entire internet runs on, and nobody wants to do that. But that's what's destroying the fabric of society writ large.
And the absence of proper education for people to be able to just discern what is right and what is wrong. Like we were talking about this drone, like there's this drone stuff that's happening on I would say on social media, because everywhere I look there's like drone sightings all over New Jersey. It's shifting to other parts, and now a whole massive
I honestly
narrative
don't
is
know what the
emerged.
fuck is going on. Like I don't understand what's happening with that at all.
Right, but my point is, I don't know what I'm believing on Facebook. Is every one of those screenshots or video things with a little, is that true? Or on Twitter? Any of that is real? How much of that is AI generated bullshit? Like that's my, like, I feel like our ability to discern has been taken away as well, even for smart people as well. And my question now, if we go a little deeper, is there a role for Apple and the platform makers here to determine something? I don't know what the answer is.
Destroy the micro-targeting economy, right? Like, and I'll say this, like Apple is the only player who's kind of tried to do something about this, but can't really effectively do it too well, right? Like all those fights around the browser wars right now, right? The conversation we had a couple of episodes ago about like, oh, you're selling Chrome. What is that worth? What does that mean? Right? Like I would take Apple buying Chrome, right? Buying the Chromium code base and deciding to replace WebKit and blah, blah, but more importantly, just fucking the entire ads and cookies mechanism out of it, right? Like that might be one of the few scenarios where I'm like kind of on board with some of what's going on there. But the point here is something has to destroy that mechanism. I would love for it to be regulatory. I just don't believe in the effective power of regulation. Like, I think this is the kind of crusade the Europeans could decide to take on. I just don't, somebody asked us about, we had a comment about like the CRA, the Cyber Resiliency Act that's coming up in the EU, which we should address. And we've had all kinds of discussions about regulation on this podcast. I would love for regulation to target this problem specifically. I just don't I don't know that that's going to effectively be able to handle this situation at all. And the thing that I have left to have any kind of faith on is some version of technological progress that essentially torpedoes that business model and replaces it with something else.
There are
right?
no
Like,
incentives, though. I mean, what's the incentive for
well,
Apple to do it? Apple is off doing another set of bullshit with AI anyway. I mean, we'll get into that as well. The idea that Apple is this trusted, clean ecosystem partner that's going to fix everything is such bullshit.
No. They're not a trusted, clean ecosystem partner at all. They just have a different incentive structure, right? They're a products company, and they think that their whole thing is to sell hardware and software to clients without like cannibalizing into their data. So my thinking is, who has the money to buy Chromium, turn it like clean it up, fix it up, and remove the ads network? It's Apple might be the only one of the few organizations that has a vested interest in that. I'm not saying that's what they should do, and I'm not saying that that's what they're going to do. I'm just saying if I'm looking around scrounging for somebody that has resources and incentive, motivation to change this situation, they're one of the few organizations that comes to mind. However, if you're asking me what could actually fix this or change it, I hope that this AI ecosystem finds some way to monetize that subverts the ads mechanism, because that's what we're seeing, right? The only thing that's killing Google is OpenAI and ChatGPT and Claude and all these different things coming in and saying that paradigm of searching, that's for boomers. We don't do that shit anymore. Forget that. You don't need all these fucking ads and all this bullshit. Yeah, we have hallucination problems. We have all these things that we're trying to clean up the tech on. But why are you going and sifting through 20 pages worth of ads when I can just give you a 2-paragraph concise answer to your specific question with sources in case you need to read them, and you no longer have to see 400 ads along the way, right? Like, that shit's not quite working perfectly, but it's a disruption of the only mechanism that has motivated the development of the internet other than pornography for the past like 10 fucking years.
I don't know. You're going down a very, very dangerous path there. All these AI guys.
You have to rewrite it. We have to
but
rewrite it.
But for them to do that, they have to screenshot everything on your machine every 5 seconds. And everyone is doing
No,
it
they
too,
don't.
including Apple. Everyone is doing it, including Apple. But wait. Before
I'm
we
not saying
get
they're
there.
not doing it. I'm saying they don't need to do it. I'm saying that's not the only way, right? Like, what happened to good old-fashioned keylogging, guys? What the fuck is all this screenshot shit?
Wait. We're going too fast. I want to get to that, but I want to pivot to this this European, what is it called, Costin? Cyber Resilience Act that Juanito brought up, and we talked about the responsibility of these device vendors and these bigger platform vendors. We had a fan question from someone, and I want to read it in full because I think it's a great question. One of our listeners, Crying the Mick, he says, I'm enjoying your podcast, especially the rants about big tech not having incentives to properly fix existing software and build things secure by design. He says in Europe, the CRA will come into force from the 10th of December onwards. Is that accurate? I mean, do we know that that's accurate? Because we don't really fact check.
We don't fact check shit.
The CRA will come into force. The CRA will come into force on the 10th, and it needs to be implemented within 3 years. And the question is, how much of a difference do you think this CRA will make, whether, however you're optimistic about it, to change things for the better? And is there spill-off benefits here in the US that we'll get from that Secure by Design push? Costin, update us on what's happening in Europe.
Man, like I'm not. First of all, disclaimer: I'm not a lawyer, but I know how to read. So I spent some time reading this because I tell you, I haven't heard of this before. Like for me, it was like, oh no, the European Union put together some new regulation or some new chat control initiative. Dear Jesus, not another one. So I did spend some time reading what they're saying there. And I guess there's good points and there's some bad points. I think the trick will be how to implement all those, and in particular the kind of stress that brings to companies that have to comply with that. So it's unclear to me, like who will be supporting all these costs, like who will be responsible, who will be enforcing in case you do not comply with this Resilience Act, and so on. So there are a few things which are unclear to me. I think there's probably good angles about it. There's good things that could come out, and there's also bad things. And we just need to wait and see how it plays. There's no crystal ball that allows us to say, yeah, this will be good or this will be bad.
We have GDPR.
Oh no, the GDPR.
Juanito, are you optimistic?
No, I'm not about anything. But in particular, when it comes to, like, I'm not optimistic about anything, and I'm not optimistic about anything the Europeans do. All due respect, right?
Thank you.
I had a meeting with some European gov folks this week who wanted to discuss the CRA and some of the stuff that they're kind of putting together. And I admire it. I admire the work. I'm not saying don't do it, right? Like, oh, you're gonna show us your little bottle cap, man. Just care. Oh, there. Angle. We got it. You're missing out on the video here, but look, I think it's the wrong thing to do to demotivate the things that we want to see. So I'm not going to jump down the throats of European regulators and say, well, you guys are idiots and there's nothing good that you can do, when at the same time I'm saying, God, I wish people would regulate some stuff, right? So I'm not going to say that. I think the issue here is that it's hard to create generalized law for something that changes all the time. That's what we learned with Wassenaar. It's what Katie Masuris has taught us time and time again, right? Every time the lawmakers sit down to do something quote unquote good, they create a bunch of externalities and problems that no one could foresee, right? I'm sure that the people who crafted the CFAA, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, back in the fucking 90s, had no idea how problematic that was going to become for the rest of us. And the law is far too intransigent and slow to really adapt to how technology works. At the same time, it's why I want to point at some of the dynamics rather than point at the particular companies or software suites or problems. Like the problem is not TikTok. Before TikTok, the problem was Twitter. Before Twitter, the problem was Facebook. Before Facebook, the problem was something else. There are greater dynamics at play here. So with the CRA, look, the cost and stress added to companies is a real factor. It's the reason that we use as an excuse in the US not to regulate, right? Like the idea that we would do anything that would slow the innovation of our tech sector, which is like the lifeblood of whatever American hyperinflated economy it is that we're obsessed with. We don't want to mess with that at all. However, the whole point is to add stress. The whole point is to add friction. And the problem that Europeans have is it's very easy for European regulation to get co-opted by regulatory capture and control from the biggest companies. Like I hate to say it, and I'm not infantilizing our European friends, but there's almost like a naivete about allowing these big American companies to come and like schmooze and woo them and hold them by the hand and pat them on the back and throw them some money and oh my God, how cool is it, right? Like the last time I went to the ICC, I'm literally at a fucking event in the ICC being hosted by Microsoft inside of the ICC, and like the prosecutor general is practically like holding hands with Tom Burt, and like they're there like powwowing and so proud of the fact that they're doing this shit together. Because in Europe, it looks so fucking cool that this mega American corporation is here, shaking babies and and kissing hands. And in reality, what's happening is like prime regulatory capture. You're literally going to the court, the highest court you could find, and like greasing, for lack of, I'm not going to say greasing palms because that sounds like there's some element of corruption, but rather schmoozing your way into whatever it is that is also a vessel that would frown upon you at some given time. And it makes it extremely hard because then what ends up happening with these European regulations is they add a fuck ton of stress and friction on small companies, which are the ones that would be creating new products, would be innovating, would be making new businesses, would hopefully represent Europe in a technological economy of some sort. And instead, you make everything super easy for the mega corporations who actually have no incentive to do what you want them to do, have the money to pay the fines, have the lawyers to actually negotiate things. You make everything easy for Microsoft, Google, Apple, etc., and you make everything hard for some fucking startup to kick off the ground in Romania and in Germany and whatever. Like the level of regulations in Germany right now, just to try to do like AI work, to me suggests that it's impossible right now for any kind of AI startup to start in Europe. Why would you? Less money, more regulation, more problems. Like there's no way that our European friends are going to get on the AI wagon, but we want them to regulate shit. I think look, I can keep ranting. I shouldn't rant further, but I have a lot of thoughts on this.
Say one good thing about the GDPR.
And about
I
the
can't.
Europeans.
Not well. Our European friends. I will say this: what if we can think of? I hate the term multipolar because I think it's a way of kind of just fighting the notion of Western hegemony, quote unquote, and legitimizing things like Chinese and Russian ways of governing. But if there is such a thing as a multipolar regime or world right now, it's the U.S. and sort of like
Free for all.
No, it's the U.S. free for all, basically trying to be the economic engine of the planet and just driving us like lemmings through like force to expand economically, expand at all costs. And
this
then
is happening in AI, right? This is exactly what's happening with AI. Yeah.
In every way. And then the Europeans being the opposite force in the sense of, no innovation whatsoever. No, not. Sorry, this sounds bad, but like bad conditions for innovation, not prioritizing that hyper growth, but trying to act as our conscience. And you need both. I just wish they were slightly more infused with one another in some way. Because what I want to see with the CRA, what I want to see with the CRA are good, common sense. Well, that's not the right term. Good, well crafted, well thought out regulations for how we expect companies to function, what it means for them to effectively share information, what legal agreements should look like that mean that we can no longer weaponize standard NDAs, what it means to have proper breach sharing notifications, etc., that aren't just like compulsive, and what it means if we're going to do secure by design, secure by default, instead of the bullshit CISA pledge, what it means to have a regulatory regime or even a regulatory agency whose business it is to second guess, verify, and hound every one of these fucking companies that claims to be doing secure by design and actually verify what they're claiming, right? You showed us your source code. You said you were going to be transparent. We looked at your source code. It had what we expected it to have. And we went and got a bunch of like software composition analysis companies to do certification. And when they were analyzing each one of your patches, it turns out you're fucking lying. So first of all, here's a $20 million fee. Also, what's your timeline for fixing this regression in OpenSSL that got baked into your latest patch, even though it wasn't there when we reviewed your source code 2 months ago? Like, it takes a level of expertise and engagement that you're not going to do with these one-off, like, we just fined Google $50 million because we wanted to fund some project that we didn't know what to get the money for. It's like, it's a legitimate feedback loop that means that we also, in opposition to GDPR, we also have a regulatory regime that is predictable. The problem with GDPR is that it's a complete flight of fucking fancy, and they just decide where they're going to apply it. But at what point has the European Union gone after the shady ad network companies that are doing all of the ad tech and doing all of the like data hoarding, instead of just trying to charge Facebook and Google and whatever random fees to, just for the fuck of it, right? It makes it so that there is no predictability to the regulation. There's no way to comply with it. And that's what's given an excuse for all these corporate lawyers to just make up what it means to be compliant with GDPR, which seems to always be get rid of all security telemetry so that we can't investigate anything in the future because it's PII, toxic, whatever. And you're like, yeah, how convenient, right?
Aye. We mentioned Apple and we mentioned AI, and there's a Twitter post that I shared with you guys ahead of this from Stefan Casas, who's a member of the technical staff at OpenAI. I don't know if this tweet will stay up, but he's actually documenting. He published a video on documenting Mac OS applications quietly capturing screenshots as a user enters text into like random input fields in multiple applications. And he documented what looks like Windows recall, basically, including keystroke grabs being put into these private temporary files, right? That alongside with news out of Tom's Hardware that Windows recall has been documented taking screenshots of credit cards and other private sensitive information that they say they won't record. Like, we are in this free-for-all world where there's no notification, there is no checkbox required to do this. It's all turned on by default. We discussed it in a previous podcast with the triangulation guys actually piggybacking on Apple's use of AI to make exfiltration much, much easier. Why does Apple get away with it when it's a controversial thing for Microsoft? And why can't nobody get this right? Is this the world we're going to be living in where everything will be screenshotted for every AI purposes and that's just going to be default? How do you guys read what's going on?
Costin, it's got to be you. I've been talking nonstop for like 20 fucking minutes.
Speaking from the point of view of European not innovation into looking at things, I was thinking that maybe it was a bit unclear in the post on X exactly who is doing that. So it does say it features a series of macOS applications. I was wondering which applications. Maybe he
Yeah, but
has
if you
some
looked at the
backdoor.
video, it was default Mac native Mac
Well, he
applications.
also
How
No,
do you
mentions
know?
if
How do
you
you know?
he mentions if you create, all it takes is creating a text file, which to me means there's some kind of like hidden file setting in which you turn this thing
Mm-hmm.
on,
Mm-hmm.
which is the way that like macOS does a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Which is to say, also like that's a really easy thing to set off, right? So it's not like there's much security to it. Um, look, you mentioned the spotlight thing with op triangulation. I think that highlights something really important, right? I read the op triangulation thing with fascination and very carefully, and it didn't occur to me that they were taking advantage of the spotlight search and its ability to like I just didn't understand the implications, right? Like I didn't understand that you were getting to take advantage of this pseudo AI powered recognition thing, of like the same way that I can jump into my photos and search for cats or keyboards, and it'll bring up a bunch of pictures that have been sort of automatically tagged. So I think the main point here, the way that you're comparing recall versus what's happening with Apple, is that Apple didn't make a fucking show of announcing it like it's a product feature. They just shut the fuck up, baked the implementation into their OS, and
and
moved
we
on.
applaud that.
I'm not applauding it. I'm just
I'm still
pointing the
not sure here.
difference.
To me, it doesn't seem to be the same thing as recall. So again,
Right.
recall, like it's supposed to solve a certain issue, which is for you to historically search whatever you're doing. It's unclear to me what this feature at Apple. Maybe it's just some kind of a backup or like historical record of what you're doing in the system that you can enable if you want. But again, it doesn't come enabled by default. It's not some kind of AI, new magic AI feature that rolls with Windows that has to be postponed, re-rolled, postponed again. To me, it seems like a bit different. I don't know. If you're showing me a Mac that does this by default out of the box, or where some kind of a software update turns this feature on without you knowing, then I would freak out.
Yeah,
But like this, I don't know.
I
Costin,
can
all
see
this
what it's
Apple
for,
ships.
though.
Apple doesn't transparently ship and document things that they're shipping. iOS 18.2 now has all kinds of fancy AI magic doing fancy imaging things. Like nobody knows how that works. Do you
And it
know how that works?
sucks.
Do you know what they shipped silently in the background without like any sort of documentation and press release? Because that's what Juan's thing is. Microsoft got into trouble because they issued a press release and tried to sell Windows PCs because of it, right? But I'm saying
The PM got too far ahead in celebrating their product launch before
and
they
worse,
knew what they're
they
doing.
put Satya on CNBC to boast about it. Like that's the worst thing. Anyway, iOS 18.2 has this AI thing. Have you guys updated your iPhones yet?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Have you been playing with their AI magic? Are we to
I've
be
been playing
excited
with
about
it for
what's
a
coming?
while. No, it fucking sucks, dude. Like it's so bad. It's so bad. Like I'm all for onboard device like AI. I understand that it's harder. You're talking about small like language models being run on device. At the same time, I think Apple is doing what Apple does. It kind of like throws a feature out there and it goes, "See how you like it." And you go, "This is really
Nah.
poorly done. Like this is pretty shitty. How do we fix this?" And they're like, "Man, we'll get around to it." You go, "Please turn this thing off," right?
And there is no inspectability at all there for us to know what's going on. I mean, Costin, I understand you applied for one of these Apple security research device programs,
Oh,
these
did
kind
you
of
get
hacked
it?
iPhones. Did you get it?
Well, I applied as you advised me to.
Yeah.
This is actually, I think it's the second year in a row that I apply, and I was rejected again.
Oh,
I
really?
got the
This is
I
recent?
got
Did they
the
give you a reason?
I got the rejection yesterday.
Oh, this
There's
is
no
new.
reason. There's no reason.
Yesterday?
Yesterday, yeah. Well, maybe
I'm
other people,
here.
but I'm curious if other people also got rejections yesterday. It doesn't say the reason. I I can only speculate because we don't know. But if you come to think of it, why is Apple actually sending these research devices over to people? In my opinion, because they want to see how these people are trying to break them, and based on that telemetry and based on what they learn from people trying to break these
So they're
devices.
spying on these devices. You're saying there's a implant on these
We're
devices.
not talking about implants. We are talking about enhanced telemetry. We're talking about business intelligence,
Business intelligence collector.
things like that. We don't use things like implant or telemetry.
This
we
guy
use
is
business
learning.
intelligence.
This guy is learning from episode to episode.
I'm listening to the three buddies. Yes. If you ask me, this is why they're sending the devices, because they want to business intelligence on the security researchers trying to break them. And to be honest, I'm not one of those people. I'm not someone who will just happily go and try to burn my exploits, 0 days, whatever, by running them on such a device. On the contrary, what I would do actually, I would try to use these devices for other things like catch unknown malware, maybe expose some kind of abuses, expose different kind of surveillance. And I guess that's not in line with the end goal, which
That's
again,
not in Apple's interest. Why would Apple
it's
want
not
you
in
to
Apple's
sit?
interest. It is in my interest, but not in their interest. Our interests are not the same.
I need
And
this T-shirt, but it also
I'm not
says Apple.
Boris
It
Larin.
says Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Apple. It's like a giant list of fucking companies. Does not care about you.
I
Needs
mean,
to be.
yes, I have what I have like 100 iPhones just laying around.
Flex.
I think I
Flex.
spend more money on iPhones than I spend on buying our apartment here, and
not a single MacBook. Like he's got all
I
this
have
shit.
two MacBooks. I have two MacBooks
man, you
that I
don't-
didn't
it's-
buy. I want
They're
them.
not even Apple Silicon, man.
You
Like
want
you're
them
like
at
10
SAS
years old.
You won them at
Listen.
SAS prices 12 years ago.
I won them as SAS prices 12 years ago. That's a reality.
Wow.
Guys,
But
we've-
nevertheless, I still spend like more money on iPhones than on my apartment. And
Very good.
I can,
Wow.
of course, jailbreak all these things. I can jailbreak the hell out of them. I can inspect them, do what I want, because they're all old. They're old, and they're also susceptible to checkmate.
Costin,
I can't do
let's
that
take
for the newer devices, to be honest. But I mean, yeah.
Costin, let's take the iOS reversing training at that Vector 35 conference in February. Let's go obsess over some iOS shit. Ryan, before you move on, I think look, the recall side of things, which I'm eager to test. Like I'm actually eager to test and see how sort of the workflow goes.
By the way, I don't think they've shipped it yet. I mean,
I
since
got
the
it.
last time we spoke, do you remember when we met David Weston at LabsCon?
Yeah.
And then right after that, we had the big story about all the new mitigations that they built into it, this kind of proof of presence thing, and we all applauded it. And then it got cancelled, and then it got cancelled again. And I think it's now in the Insider preview. It's not quite in the ship. Have you been able to play with it? What's going on?
I will be. Ask me again next week, and also I need to like figure out if I'm allowed to talk about it. But like,
Okay.
yeah, there's stuff there. But look, what I wanted to say, and I think it's a more important point, and it is sort of showing the thinking that I'm going into this HushCon keynote with today, which is part of the problem here. The reason that we're seeing dumb fits and starts is there's clear, massive opportunity right now with the AI shit, but it's not clear what that opportunity is. Like, where does it land? Where is it useful? Where is it monetizable in some meaningful capacity? So what we're seeing is a bunch of dumbass like PMs trying to say, well, what if the thing you liked had AI? What if the thing you already use had AI? What if the thing that you liked last year but you don't like anymore? What if that had AI? Do you like it now? Like, it's just a lack of creativity that comes with just it's the Google approach to chat, right? Like, oh, you like this? What if I put chat in it, right? Like that's what they tried to do for like their idiotic product launches for like a decade. And the truth is, it turns out you can add and restart chat 30 times and it doesn't make it any more exciting. What's happening with this AI stuff is we don't know what the thing is. We just know that somebody broke some ground. And like now we have this amazing ability to do something that seems like it should be useful. And we don't know what the consumer grade application of that is. So we're just going to keep doing dumb shit where we try to add AI to existing products. And it's like the IoT thing, right? Like, what if your toaster was connected to the internet? And you're like, cool. So to me, the issue here is these idiots are not like PMs are not going to suddenly figure this one out. What we need is tech people to say, fuck consumer grade tech, fuck your $5 iOS app that you hope to subscribe. This thing is a paradigmatic change in how we do work. It's a change, it's a it's an exponential change in human throughput as far as like our IO goes, right? Most of the work we do in human development and technology has been about changing the input output bandwidth of a human mind. And this is the new big exponential change. What are we gonna do with that is actually technologically significant and meaningful in how human beings gather information, output information, are able to structurally change the world around them? Like, what is the true asymmetrical advantage that this has added to us as human beings, the way the bicycle did for our ability to move, the way the computer did for our ability to think? And we need to figure that out. We, as like technological, capable, smart people who have specialties and needs in the space, not them. And like, we need to get past this. We have swallowed this poison pill of VC necessities as like the only way that we can start companies, right? Like, we never think about like, hey, how much money would it take for the three of us to have salaries and benefits and sit for a year and just work on a product, right? Like, maybe scratch, you scratch $1 million and you say, we're going to try this for a year and see what we do. Nobody thinks that way anymore. There's no garage band team. We all make more money than anybody who started any of the companies that we admire at the time that they did. And none of us think it's possible to start a company because we've been sold on this notion that we need a $15 million seed round, and then we're going to hire marketing people. We're going to spend all this money on ads. We're going to spend all this money on cloud infrastructure. We're going to hire HR people. We need a lawyer. We need a finance person, whatever. You know what that is? That's spending $15 million, giving away equity, changing your incentive structure, needing to make 100x return on money that you didn't need in the first place. And at no point that we talk about you working on a product. So like, we need to change our thinking about this shit and just go start a bunch of small security companies that use AI until we hit it big on the thing. And then everyone else can just go fuck themselves with their like random little product that adds search and adds chat and adds whatever.
Has AI changed your life in any way since you've been introduced to it over the last year, let's say year and a half, Costin?
Yes, it did actually with honestly with one thing, maybe two, programming. So I started doing more prompt programming instead of me writing the code, actually asking ChatGPT to write it for me. And with the new Canvas thing, it's amazing, to be honest. I mean, I can't imagine programming without it again. That's a reality. And for doing homeworks, that's the reality. I have to do homeworks with my daughter, and I don't remember my Spanish. Like Spanish homeworks are holy crap. Madre de Dios. Que bárbaro.
Your Spanish is getting better than mine, I'll say that.
So yeah, for homeworks and programming, I think it's a new reality. It's amazing. But otherwise, I wouldn't trust AI to book my vacation. I don't know. I see them making mistakes, like sometimes silly mistakes or terrible mistakes, like which are so subtle that maybe you don't spot in the beginning, even when you do homeworks. Like it's so confident that this is the correct solution, and it's not the correct solution. And the moment you say, hey, there's a mistake. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to immediately reshuffle everything, completely change it, and here's a totally different result that I'm sure that this is the right one. Well, it's not. Oh, yeah, let's do it again. So I wouldn't trust
That is
real
getting
life
better and
things
better,
yet.
though, in
It
fairness.
is, but yeah, it's getting better and better at your expense. It feels like you're a guinea pig, and this is some kind of an experiment in which, you're suffering to make the AI a little bit better for the next seed round.
Very, very quickly, Juanito, has it changed your life? I mean, in very, very meaningful ways?
It has changed my life massively. It has changed my life genuinely massively. And there's several, and I kind of sat here and just started writing that, right? Because I think it's important to note that. But there's a few ways. I won't go into the teaching side of it because I have discussed this many times, and there's like a blog out there and everything at the Alpin, the Alperovich Institute website. But it on the reverse engineering front, it's made such a massive difference that I have considered like starting a company to just do this kind of thing. Like I think there's like a lot of different ways, and you can see Vector 35 baking it into Binary Ninja. Like on the reversing side, it's huge. On the programming side, it's huge. Those things might not seem like a big deal when you're talking about people who already program, right? Like it's amazing to me to hear that from Costin, who's been writing code for longer than probably I've been alive, and is still like appreciating it to that level. Well, remember, I'm a philosophy major. I didn't come at this with a computer engineering degree. I don't necessarily have a good understanding of algorithms and certain like higher level structures and all these different things. I now have an amazing idiot savant that I can have conversations with at any time of day and say, hey, how am I supposed to do this in Awk? And how does this work? And how would you implement this? And what's the system architecture for this? And like, how should I develop this and that and the other? Is it perfect? No, not at all. But the whole point is it's contextually relevant and immediate enough and has enough information to be the same equivalent as if I called somebody very smart who has no problem taking all the time in the world to just explain shit to me, and then implements the code, and then does this, that, and the other. And then I can hit a reset button and start a different conversation in parallel. And like, there's many ways in which that immediate relevance has served as a leveling field, like a leveling of the field as far as like how much information that I come into this conversation with, how much previous understanding that I have about X, Y, and Z. And like, you know, in that, like you can have like the voice chat with OpenAI open up and just have a conversation about your cooking and have a conversation about whatever. It has really changed how I think about information flow and what it means to not be adequately prepared to take on a task. And I think that that's no small feat. So on the reversing, on the programming, it's made a huge difference in general for like certain research things, for certain types of thinking, it's made a huge difference for me. It is not making a difference in the way that some people expect, right? Like on the search side, on the, you know, replacing Google side, it is not doing that yet because it's not doing it well. And I think part of it is the opacity of how these systems are being built. Like what Costin just described about like, I get an answer for something, it's super confident, but it's deeply wrong. And then I say, hey, you're wrong. And it goes, oh, here's a completely different answer. And I'm dead certain about it. What you're seeing is this kind of many worlds approach to the text generation. It's because it's not reasoning. It's saying, hey, we tried this thing, it was bad. Try this completely different strategy and see if it kind of produces better results. And it's basically A/B testing of saying like, hey, give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Like, was this better or not? And then it's going to correct about how it approaches those questions in the future, which is different. That's sort of like the chain of thought way that you want to handle LLMs now with like O1 Pro, right? Like I signed up for that $200 ChatGPT shit during our last stream just so that I could play with it.
God.
Look, I'm
Must
an
be
expensive.
nice. Must be nice to have budget codec. Costin.
No. Look,
How
dude,
much better is it?
It's
Budget
$200. It's 10 times better. Literally,
It is?
Like,
Is it worth the money?
It costs 10 times more, so it's 10 times better.
Is it
it's
10 times?
no. It's I would say it's 2 to 3 times better, not 10 times better, because I loved O1 preview, so I'm willing to pay for O1 heavily because really, here's the thing, dude. O1 preview was just hiding how many tokens these motherfuckers were burning to answer every query. Because what O1 is doing is it's doing meta queries about the query you just asked, and then meta prompts about that, and then tasking a bunch of different agents to do a bunch of smaller actions, and then it's condensing all of those things before answering you. So think about it. There's like 10, 20 queries being run, each with their own amount of tokens that are being burned for each one of those queries. So it's extremely expensive for every dumb question you ask. It's asking 20, 30 questions and then coming back to you. So they don't want to show us how many tokens are being burned. Instead, they're like, why don't you just pay me 10 times as much, bro? And like, I'll worry about it. You don't worry about it. And like, we'll just go from there. Like, I think that's what's happening. And, you know,
Quickly, I'll leave you guys with...
What is the fair cost of AI in your opinion?
Everyone's jobs, gig economy, the entirety of like the social fabric of our society, all of that is a fair cost for the sake of, you know, shareholder value, bro. No, I don't. I really don't know what the fair cost of it is. I don't mind paying this because I can and I will likely try to expense it. But like, but more than anything, on a societal cost, I think the cost is going to be too high unless we can figure out something that genuinely provides like a grander human value. Unless the way that there's a different way that we can think of this in like power density, you know, Vaclav's Mill style thinking, which is cryptocurrency gave us GPUs that enabled AI. Maybe AI will give us nuclear power developments that will enable the next aspect of human development. Because like, I don't know, maybe AI sucks balls. It doesn't actually really do anything for us. But in the meantime, we bring back 3 Mile Island and like we figure out how to better use nuclear power in like smaller cells around the world. And, you know, okay, fine.
You got me there. I was hoping that you'd say that maybe AI will give us more GPUs to get more magic money.
It's just it just feeds itself,
yeah,
right? Like
exactly.
Hype feeding hype.
I leave you guys with 2 thoughts. My mom is in her 70s down in Florida caring for my elderly ailing dad. And yesterday she pinged me about ChatGPT being down. That's a trend line.
Wow.
That's a trend line. And I'm serious about it. The tipping point of ChatGPT and these tools becoming more and more mainstream to just the average everyday people is real. It's very, very real. And the other second thought on this, just to close the loop on it, I can't shake the feeling that it's making me lazy. It is intellectually making me lazy. It's intellectually forcing me to punt things to this always on assistant that maybe I should have thought about. It's just you know, that voice in your head that says, hey, shouldn't you be thinking about this yourself? Are you experiencing that at all?
Everything is a little more inefficient right now, but I don't think that's how it's going to hold up. Like, to your point, when I get these big verbose ChatGPT generator responses, knowing that a human being didn't even write them, like my eyes gloss over them. Like I'm not sitting there reading 4,000 paragraphs worth of random, statistically de-randomized text. But to your first point, I wish my grandmother had lived for this era. Like she was a brilliant, brilliant woman, stunted in the sense that like she was not allowed to have a proper education. And I watched her like read encyclopedias and trying to learn all this stuff in her own time. And when she hit her late 70s, we got her an iPad mini and she fucking loved it. Like she figured out how to like, you know, search on Wikipedia and whatnot, but it was still limited by her ability to like know where to go and know what to type. I wish I could have watched her have a one button click. Like I've got the OpenAI like widget. You literally press one button and it starts a conversation with this thing. And
this guy's all in, Costin.
I don't have time, right? Like you have a PA and EA and your team and your friends and whatever, the calendar and the to-do list. And if I take the opposite view to what you just described. I want to delegate as many things as possible to whatever the most able runner is in order to free up some mental real estate for the things that I should be spending time thinking about. And that's the efficiency game that's probably going to take the rest of my fucking days if I can figure it out.
Costin, do you worry about this lazy thing with your daughter?
Man, I worry in let's say, on one hand, I worry a bit, but on the other hand, I also value the ability, to have a bit more time to think about the things which matter, to play more chess online, to do more taekwondo,
There we go.
to grow like as a human being, if you want. I mean, but
So you
during
give
my
away think
programming,
time?
what's
Like
that?
you give away deep think time?
No, what I was thinking is that all my life, whenever I was confronting with a solution, I was looking for the most effective way to solve it for like a problem. What is the best way to solve it? And let's say, even if it's something as simple as crawling the web or fetching a page, rendering and taking a screenshot. And there were like people, a lot of people that I spoke with who were saying like, no, you have to solve this using I don't know, Lisp, or you have to solve this with this particular language for some reason because this is the best. And I was like, nah, I'm gonna solve it with the easiest possible thing, like because this is not the end goal. The end goal is not to take that screenshot. The end goal is like the bigger picture. Is the bigger what is your goal here? Like we are building a system that does X or Y, and that's the bigger goal, not how like the small things get implemented. If AI helps me optimize all these small things, the chain links, then it means that we are building the chain faster and I have more time for chess. So it's kind of a
Exactly.
win-win.
We are 1 hour in and we haven't touched on the news on one of the busiest news weeks in a while. I mean, it feels like everyone is pre-dumping their stuff ahead of Christmas just to hide stuff. Can we do some quick hits quickly just to kind of go
Sure.
through a lot of the big stories that's happening?
Let's go.
Since last week, Microsoft dropped part 2 of their Turla blog. And this is just more information on what they described last week alongside the folks at Lumen. Black Lotus Labs. But the big news here is that the Russian actor used these tools stolen from other APTs to compromise targets in the Ukraine, and including some of your previous work, Costin. I see the link to the Epic Turla blog again here for this Tavdig backdoor and creating a foothold to install this Kazwar V2 backdoor. You were able to read this. Did we get any new IOCs? Anything big and interesting and fascinating we learned from this second post?
Well, for me this was fascinating because I haven't seen Tavdig being mentioned for a very long time. Just for context, back in 2014 when we wrote our first blog called The Epic Turla, that was when they were massively using this backdoor called Tavdig. Somehow I suspected what I was thinking, at least in my mind, that Tavdig has been replaced with Casuar because the communication protocol is almost identical. Casuar is a C# backdoor. Tavdig was C++, and I was thinking that they just reimplemented, they abandoned Tavdig, but now it seems to be coming back. For me, that was a big surprise. There's a hash in the Microsoft blog for Tavdig, but unfortunately, that particular sample is not on VT. So if there's any chance that John Lambert is listening to the post and he can upload this sample as well to VT like he did the last time when our good friend Kurt asked him, that would be greatly appreciated. I haven't seen, I'm honest here, I haven't seen a Tavdig sample in ages. Knowing that there's new Tavdig samples from April, I think they said this year, that's pretty cool to me. That
Why
was
can't that
definitely
be
one
a
of the big
rule?
things.
Sorry,
What's that?
Costin, like a small tangent. Like, why can't we just set that as a standard, as a rule for us? Like, if as long as the sample doesn't have the name of your fucking customer inside of it, can you, if you're publishing a blog, can you just upload all the fucking samples to VirusTotal? Like, that's it. Like, we're just can that be the rule? Can
I'm all for it.
when we move past like, oh, don't paywall your IOCs behind some like cyber eason
Can you guys
chat
just fix the
thing?
fucking naming situation first before
Oh,
you
no,
go off
fuck
on your
off.
rules?
That's
You're wasting
an
all of our times.
That's an unsolvable problem. That's
God,
that's
you're
actually that's a ruse that we put out there to distract people like Dave Itel from like looking at the CTI space. Like we make them chase the names problem, which is unsolvable, while we deal with the other problems.
Another Microsoft observation here was Turla using an Amadei bot malware that was previously linked to some cybercriminal activity. And they're saying this is the second time since 2002 that Turla has used this cybercrime campaign to facilitate a foothold in its own malware in Ukraine. Are they stealing from cybercriminals? Are they colluding? Are they instructing? What do we believe is happening there?
Well, I mean, they've been doing this. This was, let's say, the big novelty from this previous blog from Microsoft, but also from the previous blog in the same line of thinking that Mandiant published some time ago with the Andromeda malware, I think it was. So the fact that they're also exploiting Amaday, that's interesting. I think there was a new wave of Amaday targeting Ukraine this week, or maybe just 1 or 2 days ago. And I was thinking if Turla is going to take advantage of that through SORM, like this is one of the interesting hypotheses they have in the blog, that this was likely facilitated through this legal mandated surveillance system in Russia called SORM. Very powerful in a way similar to maybe the Great Firewall of China or what the NSA is doing worldwide, not just in Russia. But very, very interesting and powerful system. I see Mr. America is blinking. That was not the purpose to finger point anyone. But to
No,
me, that was like pretty cool. Pretty cool if that is actually what is really happening here. The
Costin,
reason I brought
any
that up because I remember reading some Snowden documents where the NSA was doing pretty much the same, right? Hijacking the CNCs of some of this criminal malware and delivering their stuff on top of
well,
it.
that's what you mentioned. This wouldn't have been NSA, but I think the Canadians.
GCHQ?
Yeah, no,
Canadian?
if you remember the report you mentioned last podcast about designed by geniuses, implemented by
Yes.
morons. I mean, what they were talking about. This is off the top of my head, but I believe the reason they called them morons is in part there was a machine infected with a which one, gum something,
Gumblar.
there was a machine infected in the so sorry for the people who have not read this leaked doc, which some of you all
Some
should
of you may not be able to read it,
well,
right?
you
Or
all
you may not be
should.
able to find it because Google doesn't let you find it.
Wow. I mean, they're all on GitHub anyways. But if you can't read it because somebody told you your clearance depends on you not reading it, then you should fucking go read it anyways. Because you guys are starting to like it's kind of dumb that we know more about some of these things than things that you haven't been read into in your own houses. But the whole point is that there's this anonymization infrastructure that was set up for the Turla folks that was supposed to be, brilliant. And then, of course, the people who are using it are doing dumb shit the same way we always see, right? Where you check your VK profile and like you do all this stuff through the same, dirty network, so it's easier to identify you. But part of what the Canadians had latched onto was that there were people in sort of this Turla operators group that were infected with this botnet, and so they were picking up whatever was coming out of that botnet, information and being able to identify things from those operator boxes. So yes, to your point, this is not the first time that we see something like this, right? The notion of victim stealing or like passive collection, again, described by Costin and I in our paper for Virus Bulletin. Which we should probably link at this point because we've mentioned it a couple of times.
Epicturla.com. All the papers are
Right.
there.
Yeah, it's like walking in your enemy's shadow was the one we described this. So what I wanted to ask, Kosin, is on the SORM side of it, I actually have a couple of questions, and you can tell me if this is like, this is something I should be asking the Microsoft folks instead. A, when you mention Amaday having like a fresh wave of targeting Ukraine, is that the Amaday operators themselves that are doing that, unbeknownst to, without knowing that the Turla people are maybe sitting on their infra or like using their stuff? At which point, I would also say, what else is Amaday targeting, right? That that they also get to piggyback on, right? Like everything we've discussed, we've heard from the previous Mandiant blog with Andromeda, and now with this Microsoft blog with Amaday, is about how that's being used in Ukraine. And the idea that the Turla operators have access to these botnets that have infections worldwide and they're only using them for Ukraine seems silly to me, but who knows, right? Like, okay. So I'm curious if it's them doing is it the Amaday folks who have a natural incentive to continue these infections, or is it the Turla guys? And then the
Or are
next
they the
question
same people?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's like Spider-Man pointing it, but like, no, I think the value of this is that they're not, right? Like the value of this is precisely that that's not necessary. But then the other question I would ask is if this is being enabled by SORM, how does, at what point of that operational infrastructure does SORM get access to any of this? Because are we suggesting that SORM is functioning over Ukraine's internet, or is it where the Amade operators or command and control servers live? Like, at what point in the chain does SORM get to kind of inject itself? Because, I mean, it's a Russian surveillance system, right? In Russia. What are we suggesting here, right?
Mm. Well, you have to keep in mind that even for some things, and I think we've seen this in the past. So let's say that some malware like Amade gets deployed in Ukraine and the CNC is in Kazakhstan. There's a chance the connection from Ukraine to Kazakhstan might pass through Russia. Maybe
Right.
not like in this specific case, but we've seen such situations before when the trace route from the target was going through Russia, which essentially gives them access to the flow and potentially doing this man in the middle / man on the side attacks. I would say they're different. I don't think they're the same people. And what is probably happening here, again, just a supposition, is that on the underground forum, people are massively interested in victims in Ukraine. Like, yeah, I'm buying logs. Someone can come. I'm buying logs, which is the name for the stolen information. I'm buying logs. Even criminals are adopting
Using your fancy
this
language now.
terminology, like the business intelligence. So I'm buying business intelligence logs, cloud logs from Ukraine and paying dollar for a log or something like that. And then of course all the cyber criminals are like, holy crap, let's target Ukraine, collect the logs and sell them for $1. And in the process, the Turla guys are seeing all that activity and they're like, let's just piggyback on all this targeting whenever they see something interesting going on, like some chance infection in a place that they're interested in.
And Microsoft report actually may have mentioned one of those where we saw this Turla using the backdoor of another group called Storm 1837, which is a Russian threat actor that targets Ukrainian military drone pilots. So now you start to see the potential for those connections that you're talking about, Costin. Any last words on this?
I think it's again a testament to the fact that the Turla guys, as the Canadians say, geniuses, with still, I don't know about the operated by morons part. I don't know how that's changed nowadays, but I can tell you there's a lot more happening in the background. So I think that Microsoft is just touching the tip of the iceberg, but I can guarantee from what I know, from my friends, my information, our European intelligence and our innovation and AI happening here in Europe, I can tell you there's a lot more happening. And again, a testament to how good the Turla guys are.
Shout out to Microsoft for having this visibility as well. I mean, are they using business intelligence tools too, or this is just basic Defender telemetry?
What's the difference?
The Microsoft SORM, the M in SORM.
The M in SORM is Microsoft.
All right, I'll move on. Move on because I keep saying that.
The question is, which OS runs on the SORM systems? Like the conspiracy Ryan question.
No, I will say, we can joke around a lot, and I do not want to disincentivize the use of any of that telemetry. If anything, please Microsoft more, right? Like, I'm glad they're doing this.
Yeah.
Give us more.
Please.
As far as I can tell, nobody can seem to figure out what the skew is for buying Microsoft reports. I think they forgot the part where they needed to sell them. They, it fell around some of that planning. But in any case, great. You have some of the best intelligence in the world. Put out more of it. Share more samples. Support Mystic. Give them headcount. Do whatever it is you need to do to make them better. And do whatever you need to do to make the rest of us better, right? Like, we need more of this intel. At this time, what is being described in these blogs is a defeat of the telemetry generation of the entire industry. And it's another, like in these blogs with the Russians, same as in the other blogs with the Chinese, what we're being shown is that we're being collectively outsmarted. So maybe this is me as a quote unquote competitor wanting to dull out their competitive advantage. But actually, I think this is a great time for companies like Google and Microsoft and Meta to lead the charge in saying, hey, we have more goodies that we know what to do with. Let's start this industry consortium where we're sharing, like, here's these 400 samples that we don't have time to look at, here's all this telemetry of something weird that's happening that we don't understand, and like, we need some kind of new reconciliation of the industry wherein telemetry is not a competitive advantage as much as it is a need to defend other people. And you can still take all the fucking credit and you can sell all the products you want, and you'll deserve it. But we're getting fucked right now. Like, look at what we just described. The Turla guys are literally sitting on multiple botnets and multiple seamless infection vectors that we can't even trace their hand in. And they've been doing
We're
it
doing the
not
same thing
just
though, right? Like we have to be doing the same thing though, right? When I say we,
it doesn't matter. Like, we don't even need to, right? Like, if we don't need to, right? You have
But it's
quantum
nice.
and yeah, no, I mean, like, we have man on the side globally, right? Like, you have all kinds of stuff where we could do this externally, but those two things are incongruous, right? Like, if that is being used to collect intelligence by the NSA and these other signals intelligence giants, that becomes classified and it's only external facing, that is not defensive information for anybody. Like, we need that level of capability for the defense of people in Western nations, not just for the offensive side of intelligence collection.
at the same time, we're giving shout outs to Microsoft and applauding John Lambert for sharing samples. And John, if you're listening, shout out to your guys as well. Can you also take a look at the Microsoft bulletins that drop on Patch Tuesday? Because we just had Patch Tuesday this week. CVE 2024-49138 was marked as already exploited. 0 day reported. CrowdStrike is credited in the bulletin as the people reporting the bug. Microsoft OD exploited it in a while, and that's all we have. There is no IOCs, there is no details, there is no technical information. Nobody can go write a signature. Does this information get, well, I suppose it's already in MAP and people are able to add some detections there. But if I'm an organization and I have in the past been hit by this log file system vulnerabilities and I see a new OD and I tell my team, go hunting. What are they hunting for? Like Microsoft really, they know too. They are aware. We've flagged this in the past. Why is no one paying attention to the lack of information coming out of Microsoft bulletins on Patch Tuesday?
It's not a lack of paying attention. It's like, what do we do, right? Like, we all know John, and we know people at Mystic, and you're still making that appeal on the podcast instead of like one-on-one, because it feels like it's like a big corporate bullshit move that needs external pressure to change. But this is where I wish we had more of the Project Zero DNA baked into some of the Microsoft decisions. I would not be complaining about the bulletins being sparse or about the lack of certain context if I knew that there's a dead man switch style mechanism, the way that Project Zero has, where they go, we have the write up and we have the info, and you have 6 months or 90 days or whatever, and then this shit is going to go live. If you told me that, and that I knew that that was happening at Microsoft as well, where they're like, look, we have the TI report, we know how this is being abused, and we need time to patch, but there's a clock, there's a fucking countdown timer that's set off the minute this kicked off, that we found out about this. That means in 90 days, we're going to issue a blog or a report about it. I could accept it as like, this is what it takes to patch and manage patch cycles and whatever, but it's fine. We're going to find out in 2 months, right? Like, that's the part that, what scares me is how many things get left on the cutting room floor and they were the only place that saw it, the only place that ever understood it, that had context for it, and they have no pressure to make that information external. If anything, they have a pressure to not make it external. So what scares me is how much of the record is getting just maimed and removed as we go along, rather than knowing that this is going to be expanded and that academics are going to have access to us and researchers are going to have access to it. And somewhere, we're going to be able to complete this jigsaw puzzle somehow down the line.
Costin, do we know who's been exploiting this ODE, this common log file system ODE discovered by CrowdStrike?
I don't think so, but I maybe vaguely remember a similar vulnerability was being exploited by one of these cyber mercenary vendors. So
in the last
maybe.
5 years, they've had 25 common log file system vulnerabilities patched by Microsoft. And just as we close the year on the last patch Tuesday, I should mention Microsoft has shipped patches for 1,020 vulnerabilities in 2024. And that's just the ones documented by CVEs, because there's like a million other silent fixes everywhere. And that includes 27 documented zero-day attacks for which they were in the wild attacks prior to Microsoft releasing patches. So it's been a busy year at Microsoft. They have this Secure Futures Initiative thingy that's happening. That's going to fix everything and we'll all be fine by next year. So
done.
We will pivot quickly. Quick story.
Can we get AI to rewrite the entire Windows source code in Rust?
Yeah, Copilot will do it. Don't worry.
Oof.
We got news from Treasury that they have sanctioned a Chinese company called Sichuan Silence.
I love that
True
name.
story.
It's such a great name.
Sichuan Silence Information Technology Company and one of its employees, a guy named Guan Tianfeng, both based in China, for their roles in an April 2020 compromise of tens of thousands of firewalls worldwide. Have we confirmed that this is the Sophos thing? Or are we just kind of looking at the April 2020 date and making a matching? Costin, what do you know?
It has to be that. I mean, I don't see why they're so hush-hush about not naming which vendor. I mean, tens of thousands of firewalls. Come on, which one? Like, there's no shame because, I mean, it's already public.
Why? It's all shame.
Why hide it? Come on.
No shame because it's all shame, bro.
I think it has to be Sophos, and I wonder actually how much the business intelligence collected by Sophos actually helped
with the sanctions,
these attacks. Yeah, with the sanctions. Because why
That's
now?
That's a success story.
Why now? Yeah, of course. Maybe a success story. Maybe it's like pressure that here's all the information. You guys had all this information for years. Do something about it or just use it somehow. Of course, I guess these kind of sanctions are mostly symbolic. They don't mean much for these people who probably never leave China or don't own properties outside. Again, these are OFAC sanctions, so the really hard ones that mean that all your properties in the States, your boat, your drones in the States, they're all confiscated. But again, I think they're mostly symbolic.
But not entirely useless, right? Juanito, why is your government doing this? If it's just symbolism,
they want
or
the drones. They want the Chinese drones.
We've discussed this before on this fucking podcast about the sanctions. And I think nothing has particularly changed. And what we hope is that this enables some kind of capabilities against greater collection against these orgs, greater targeting of those people. Hopefully there's some kind of signaling shot across the bow, though frankly, anything that comes out of DOJ, whatever, right? Like it could just be somebody needs a promotion or whatever. But I'm all for it. I just don't know I don't understand the context well enough to understand what it is that we're moving towards here, which is strange because I would expect that there would be some kind of, I would expect an indictment and so on that brings us some clarity around what's happening here. And if this is one of the front companies or whatever that's doing all of this targeting of these appliances and enabling further downstream compromises, like that's a hot topic right now, and I would love to understand more about the organizations involved, right? Like if this is one where, let's say, you're hacking all these appliances and Soho routers and whatever because you're creating an anonymization network, an orb network that is then being leveraged by Volt Typhoon, Salt Typhoon, etc. Cool. I mean, not only is it cool that you're letting me know that, but like I want to understand how much of this is a series of companies and what those companies look like and what their offerings are like and how what do you call those offerings, because this is a much larger issue than just one cool company named Sichuan Silence, right? Like there's more going on here.
Staying in China, our friends at Sentinel Labs published a report on a Chinese APT compromising critical digital infrastructure by Visual Studio Code tunnels. Juanito, this is your team. What's the significance there? Why should the people go read this paper?
I mean, shout out to Alexander Milinkoski, who, as always, does amazing work. But also, if you do see him and you hear from him, give him some shit because he's a new dad, first kid, and he's supposed to be on paternity leave. So I don't condone these releases here. But no, amazing work.
It was a collab, right? A collab with
yeah.
a company called Tinexta Cyber. Who are these folks?
Yeah, though they're folks sort of doing some DFIR and some collaboration with our friends in Europe, and frankly, it's a pretty interesting infection insofar as it seems to be related to the Operation Soft Cell guys and some of these things that we saw around gallium, and this is something that Alex has given a great deal of chase, sort of figuring out multiple iterations of how this tooling is developing, how some of it seems to be spreading, and frankly, I won't even pretend to understand the clustering around this because, as they mentioned in the blog, there's a certain amount of like digital quarter mastering that seems to be happening between these different groups. So you see certain like modified versions of Mimikatz and modified versions of certain tooling that are specific to CN groups, but not necessarily only wielded by one Chinese group. And that's sort of part of the complexity that keeps me sounding like a fucking moron when it comes to Chinese APTs, because I can't really seem to parse these things in the classical way that I'm used to. In this case, the really notable thing is the use of these Visual Studio Code C2 tunnels, which is, I mean, it's a really neat little technique, right? Like I personally hate Visual Studio Code. Like I can't get used to it. It's too much bullshit, too much bloatware, too many things running that I can't control. But part of that really is any place where you have sort of some kind of development infrastructure is probably using this. Most people that do any kind of technical work or dev work, like a lot of people love it as just an IDE in general. This thing is being used to tunnel traffic in a way that I think is hard pressed for many of those organizations to detect on the wire and to block off. And it goes to show another area of vulnerability is this marketplace of plugins that, when I want a better JSON parser in Visual Studio Code, I'm pulling down whatever the hell supply chain worth of garbage is going to execute inside of my computer. And part of that is how much are you really monitoring and understanding the traffic that runs through those channels from quote unquote trusted applications that come from trusted places. And, if on the network end, you're going to have a very bad time.
This is not a vulnerability for Microsoft to fix, right? This is them abusing a feature. Am I reading it right?
I don't know. I wouldn't say that it's a vulnerability that's not to fix. I think it's a discussion about yet another ecosystem that needs caring for and maintaining carefully, right? Like the scariest parts of these marketplaces, whether it's the Android Play Store or the iOS whatever App Store or anything that is like a plug-in ecosystem, is we're not shipping streaming content. We're not shipping, it's not music, it's not videos. It's stuff that's gonna run on the machine you pull it down on. And that's where and same with like Chrome browser extensions, all that shit. Anywhere I can go, hit two buttons and have effectively given something the ability to execute on my machine is a place in desperate need, not just of inspectability, but also of healthy heaping of paranoia and a very strong-handed parental figure somewhere that's actually checking this code, telling you when it's unverified, telling you when this is this is a thing that looks like a clone of a whatever other plugin that everybody else is using. If no one is doing that, and I don't know what the security standard is for this VS Code marketplace and these other places, you are opening the door for supply chain attacks. You are opening the door for a great deal of further downstream code base poisoning. Like for all of our bullshit around solar winds and how terrifying that attack was, someone had to hack a CI/CD pipeline to do that. In this particular case, if I can land something through the VS, like directly to VS Code, um, what we're talking about here is my ability to immediately bother or infect or mess with a code base. Maybe it's just the code base that affects only a single developer's computer, in which case, okay. But how many of these things are being used to like ship products and whatnot? So I'm not saying that's the case in particular with Digital Eye. It's more about the comms that's happening. But if this is the first time that people are stopping and going, "Hey, what exactly is happening with Visual Studio Code?" You are opening a can of worms that I think you're gonna have a hard time stomaching.
Costin, we saw your team just dropped a Careto returns blog
Your
post.
team, is that like your? So I'm Team America here, and your Team Great still. This is
Great job. The Careto is back report. We discussed this on episode 15 of the podcast. Juanito, shout out to you because you took really, really good notes. The notes that you described on the podcast was actually described in this Careto blog post. It's the persistence through an MDaemon email server, an implant loading through a Hitman Pro alert driver that you had mentioned previously. Costin, you got a chance to read the report. How would you describe the quality of the report? What did we learn? How would you describe the quality of the attribution here, linking it back to Careto? It's a 10-year-old thing that we had published at one of the SaaS conferences, codename Masks. And did we get IOCs?
Well, I would say first of all, like the good things. The authors of the blog are my former colleagues Georgi Kucherin and Mark Rivero Lopez. Actually, I saw Georgi at DEF Camp here in Romania. He presented on APT 31. I know he's a brilliant researcher, so for sure the whole research here is brilliant as well. I wish there were maybe a bit more details, in particular in sense in the line of IOCs. So like from this point of view, yes, you could say there are some kind of so-called collateral or indirect IOCs, but I mean, I would have loved to see a bit of hashes, CNCs, those kind of things. I also think it's kind of brave. I find it very brave from Mark Rivero Lopez, who actually lives in Spain, to be one of the authors of this Careto research, which we say it's a Spanish-speaking APT group. I don't know if he thought about that or not. If this is an issue, maybe it's not an issue at all. But
Come
I
on,
think
man.
those
Well,
are
we've been-
interesting
Our
points
Spanish
to make.
researchers have always been some of the most enthusiastic ones to look at some of that stuff, and I always admire that, right? Like I think Marco knows, Mark knows exactly what he's doing,
All
and
right.
oh no, I'm guessing, right? Like I don't know him that well. It seems like he's an awesome dude. We got to hang out a little bit at VV and talk about some of the Careto stuff and how cool the work is. And I, all the more reason to say credit where credit is due when you're looking directly at what's possibly, home government and saying, hey, this is what I'm seeing.
Attribution.
Doing
I don't know,
a
man. I don't know.
counterterrorism operation abroad.
I don't know. I will say if you're going to publish about this, I don't want just IOCs. I don't think there's we haven't found any samples. I would love to see some of the samples pop up. And really the question here is why are you publishing this? And that's not my way of admonishing them. Like I have talked, this is one of the back of the milk carton APTs that we've talked about, right? Like Careto was discovered, it's immediately burned down. Flame discovered, immediately burned down. Dooku, etc. We had this list of APTs where we were like, okay, we discovered them and they were fucking awesome, and then they vanished, which means they figured something out because these dudes didn't just pack it up and go home, right? Like Animal Farm didn't just stop functioning, period. There must have been a sizable retooling and done some interesting other things, and they've
And
done
who
it
is this
so
animal
well.
farm?
Actually, that is the only APT that has been attributed by its own government. The head of DGSE at some point admitted that Animal Farm was DGSE from France. So
Oh.
actually, I think quite notable, laudable to our French friends that not only that they have a pretty badass operation, but they're willing to go out there and say, yeah, this is us being really badass. Good for
And then
them.
they disappeared.
And they disappeared. Even more badass, right? Like you find 8 families of our shit, and tomorrow we're out, right? You're never to be seen again. But so look, my point is, like, it's not that I don't want people to publish stuff like this. We can have conversations about whether it's good, it's bad, or whatever. But if you are publishing it, I really want to see this. Like, I really want to look at the samples.
Publish
I
it.
really want to understand. Yeah, publish it fully, because what I'm interested in is not disrupting potential Spanish ops and whatever. But if you're already bringing attention to it from a methodological standpoint as a CTI researcher, I want to know what they did that made them fall off the face of the earth for Costin. How many years is it now? 10?
10 years.
For 10
2014
years.
also.
Careto was the first APT talk I sat in on, like in person.
I still hear the song in my head.
Yeah, Evangelis, right? Like, it was epic. It was Costin and our friends doing the most theatrical portion of APT drops ever, and it was fucking epic. And these dudes vanished like immediately. We didn't see shit, and to see them come back now, it's cool that it's definitely a gold star on the researchers that found it. A, because clearly it wasn't easy, but B, gold star to the Careto guys that they knew exactly what to do to vanish. And I want to understand that. And in order to do that, you actually need to show me like the technical components of what went into this.
Costin, if you were managing Great and releasing this report, it would be different with IOCs and possible samples?
Well, I can't say that because I don't know of all the internal discussions and the reason why they're not releasing the IOCs. Maybe they're trying to incentivize people into buying the private report, which allegedly could possibly have more hashes. But
That's the business
nevertheless,
model?
that was always the business model, right?
Astronaut
good.
meme, right?
I mean,
well, can anybody
it's the
even
business
buy
model
them?
for everyone.
Can anyone buy them? If I wanted to go, like, that's the funny thing.
About
if
the
you remember-
sanctions, right?
That's a good question. You
Well,
cannot buy them. No, I don't think you
But
can
the
buy them.
sanctions were not supposed to include intelligence products, right? Like, that was somehow carved out. But then, and this is me arguing with no one in particular, just trying to reason through it, right? Like, the sanctions are not supposed to include the intel thing. But I think to be a U.S. company, operate like having some kind of financial relationship with Kaspersky, you would need some kind
How
of
do I
like
pay?
a license or some kind of allowance. Like there was, and then
Yes.
I've heard from people who have tried to get this
Get it and
and
no
have
chance.
gotten basically
No
no
reply.
response. So it sounds like, it's like GDPR with giving us who is research data eventually. It just, nobody ever thought about how to do it. Nobody actually planned for it, and you can't actually get it. Which sucks because, I mean, I miss the Kaspersky reports. I would love to read whatever the fuck they're putting out there. Like,
I'm sure someone is piggybacking on some customer's box with some business intelligence tools.
Careto is. I mean, they for sure, yeah. They're not
Business
paying for those
intelligence.
reports.
I want to pivot
Am
quickly because we're running out of time.
Am I mistaken here? But is this like there was a screenshot? Was it a screenshot on Twitter some time ago, which with Cuba? Was it related to it? Was something else?
Oh, the Casper Secrets guys? Yeah. Yeah.
It was Careto, right? Or am I mistaken? Or we don't know
What are we
it
talking
was?
No,
about?
it was. So there's an account that
There's a Twitter account called Casper
there's
Secrets.
there's a Twitter account called Casper Secrets with K's. I would love to know who the fuck runs this thing because
Because
I
they
don't know
have the subscription, right? They have the
they
report.
have access to some. So like, look, I have been asked. This account like trolls Kaspersky extremely effectively. And I've been asked by a lot of people if I run it or if I know who runs it. I guess they think that I'm enough of like a rabid KL detractor, which A, I'm not, but B, I don't know what kind of collection people think I have where I'm like on their boxes and like reading their emails and getting access to their drafts and their reports. I obviously do not have that access. I would not be trying to like get access to their reporting and their trainings if that were the case. But I'm fascinated because this account is like really like showing that they know where like Eugene is at any given moment, and they know negotiations that are being had, and they hint about like contracts and reports and things that like are not public, and they're fucking with KL. And it doesn't seem to be about garnering journalist attention because they don't tag anybody there. They're not like trying to get the big story. I'll DM them every once in a while on Twitter, being like, "Hey guys, what's up? What are you?
Are
Wait a
they
second.
answering?
Back there?" No,
What's
I
the
mean they'll send
Careto?
me every once
What's
in a
the
while. They'll send
Careto
me a GIF.
connection?
They'll just send me a GIF, and I'll send a GIF back. We just kind of like just communicate in pictures. They won't say shit, but
They're
the
gift
Careto
buddies.
connection, yeah, we're gift buddies. The Careto connection is that at some point they published a tweet with an image about the Careto report that mentioned a victim in Cuba, I believe. And it was like, they were kind of trying to sensationalize the idea of where this is being found and where, what KL's telemetry is now and who they're protecting and whatnot. And, whatever. I don't know that I necessarily agree or really understand the thrust of the argument, in part because I don't think it's for me. It seems to all be like a public campaign aimed at the minds of the people who work at Kaspersky. But yeah, they tried to kind of, to what Costin hinted at before, right? Like there's this notion that Careto, similar to Animal Farm, are big counterterrorism enabling platforms for like Western European nations. So the discussion, of course, gets extremely dicey when you start to say, well, should we be publishing this? How do you, why are you publishing this? How much of this are you putting forth? Should we be
Great
tracking
point.
these things?
Great point, because Costin, you said there are levels to exposure, right? There's publishing everything, there is putting out a
Absolutely.
report, but no
Hashes,
IOCs.
samples, right?
Samples. So maybe
That's why-
we're seeing a level of responsibility here from a vendor who recognizes that potentially a counterterrorism operation here could be at risk and not exposing it. Is that
That's
in
what
play here
I
at all?
mean by what that I do not know what is happening behind the doors in the team and the reason why they aren't sharing the hashes and CNCs.
I mean,
But
you
it
still
could be that.
published on it, right? Like, I think that's it is, I don't want to gloss over it because look, I'm expressing the kind of logic that a child expresses when they really want something, right? So like, I really want to look at the samples. Especially some of them are in Go. I really personally want to like look at the samples because I think it's really cool. So I'm biased.
Why not
Like,
ask for them?
yeah, well, I mean, I'll ping Mark and these guys, and hopefully they'll be nice and share. But the point is, like, I really care to see the samples, so I feel like I'm biased as I approach this topic because I want to parse, I want to split hairs and say no, but you can do this, but you don't do that, whatever. So yeah, maybe they're having a complex discussion of it, and they're deciding that it's not the best idea to share the samples, but I've never seen that decision go that way at KL, as far as I know. Like, it used to be, if this is not something we should talk about, then we shouldn't talk about it. You just don't fucking publish.
Maybe it's changed.
Yeah. Well, something has changed. Clearly, something has changed. I just don't know what the logic is because, it's like if this isn't something to talk about, then we just don't talk about it. Otherwise, if we are going to talk about it, like, we'd normally see the samples, or like people would upload them to VT or whatever so that other people can verify your work. I don't know. Like, I think there's ways and ways to do it. But like I said, I want to pry this out of their hands because I think it's fascinating. I don't know that that's necessarily me being the most responsible steward of this discussion, right?
When we go to Malaga next year, we'll ask some hard questions.
PivotCon?
Yes, PivotCon is in Malaga next year. Call for Papers is open. Shout out to the organizers of PivotCon. Go ahead and submit. We're big fans of that conference.
I bought my ticket yesterday, so I
Oh,
will
look
be
at
there
you.
regardless, man.
Awesome.
I'm done.
Speaking of samples, we got a report out of Claroty.
Wait, whoa. You're going to PivotCon, Ryan?
I am.
And Costin was there last year, so we can.
I will be there this year as well.
Pasquale, if you're
let's
listening,
do a live three-buddy problem
we need to do a
in
live
person.
three-buddy problem podcast in
On
Malaga.
the beach.
On the beach in
Sponsored
Malaga.
by Virus Total.
Submit your research to pivotcon.org. Pivotcon.org. Quickly, speaking of samples, Claroty's T82 pushed out a report saying they obtained a sample of a custom-built IoT OT malware called IO Control, used by Iran-affiliated attackers to attack Israel and US-based OT IoT devices. This IO control is described as a cyber weapon used by a nation state to attack civilian critical infrastructure. What do we know about this? Did they share enough IOCs that we were able to recreate? What are we talking here? There's cyber weapons flying around.
Costin, I'm hoping you read it because I glanced over it.
Of all the stories, like this one dropped at the last minute, so I only very quickly looked through it. I'm familiar. I've seen cyber Avengers before, which are suspected to be one of these aliases for the IRGC Cyber Electronic Command. They are quite active in the sense of doing operations on Telegram, hack and leak. This is maybe a bit more unusual. I admit that I haven't got the time to read it in detail because there's been so much happening this week with the drones, with Google's quantum computers, with magic money, people being afraid they're going to lose their magic money because of Google's quantum computers. So I hope
These are the things taking up your mind.
To deep dive. Yeah, these are the things that, worry me. There's this, the Careto, then there's the Claroty team 82 about these attacks. Then there's the drones, and the
I
aliens.
don't understand the drones thing, but I will say on the Claroty thing, I am super, super interested in this, and I flagged it because it just it popped up. I can't remember who sent it to me, but it popped up right before the recording. So I was just kind of hoping that
I didn't bring it up.
Well, no, I was kind of hoping Costin would do all the hard work, right? But I do see there's samples on VT, there's stuff out there. So I am really, really curious. I also am really interested anytime we see, I assumed when I first glanced at it that this was just going to be some IoT shit, the way that we saw with Cyclops Blink and VPN filter and so on. But they're talking about SCADA systems being involved as well, and that's Claroty's specialty, right? That's
and those guys are good, by the way. Those Team 82 guys are very, very good.
Yeah. Claroty is they're cool dudes. And shout out to Team 8, which at some point put an event where I got to meet some of the folks that head up Claroty. And I'm all for anybody that's doing the SCADA thing and putting out this level of report. What I will say is, having glanced through the report, seeing the samples on VT, seeing the level of analysis and the IDA screenshots, what this does not look like? Dragos. So I'm very excited to dig into this a little bit more, and shout out to those dudes. And maybe the folks that are listening here, there's enough brain matter to go chase this down as well. So happy hunting, guys.
The story is that
let's revisit. Let's look into this, and let's revisit it next episode, because I think it's really interesting.
Well, I want to pivot back to the other story. The story there out of Claroty is that Iranian-affiliated actors are hitting these SCADA OT devices, PLCs, HMIs, firewalls, a whole list of things, and attacking critical infrastructure, IGRC linked. We also got a new report out of unbindinghooks.com on Predatory Sparrow that we've discussed in the past as well, which is kind of like a cyber sabotage non-governmental group that we've discussed breaking into Iranian TV stations and some of the disruption things that are happening there. The idea there is that the Israelis have a conscience and they're showing ethical restraint. Is that a political report we're reading here, or is this a legitimate thing we should actually talk about where...
Which one? Because you mentioned the Claroty thing.
I'm connecting them because one, do you see a parallel at all between what we're seeing from Iran doing the same to Israel that Israel has been documented doing to Iran? That's the question.
Well, there's they're two hands to the same
And
thing, right? Like,
what does an ethical campaign look like? An ethical
um,
disruption campaign.
so shout out first of all, like the binding hook thing is actually from our friend Max Smeets and ECRI, which is sort of the European Council on this cyber stuff that Max has put together. And there's quite a few. They've been doing some really interesting events over the past couple of years, some roundtables and stuff, putting the right folks on the policy side in Europe with researchers, and they've all of them have been amazing. So I'm happy to see Binding Hook and the sort of virtual routes initiative that they're working on to try to do more trainings in Europe. Like this is the kind of thing where I hope we'll do more stuff like this in the US. Like we don't have the equivalent in the US of just funding like a think tank to do this kind of shit. Instead, we get like garbage from the Atlantic Council. But the
Look
on
at
the
you. Look
binding,
at you throwing darts
oh, I'm just fucking throwing bricks
every
everywhere.
segment.
I want to see what window smashes first. But no, I'm all for it. I don't think it's a political report. If anything, I actually wrote Max right before the recording and was like, "Hey, man, like you guys are so academic. Like you need to take some stances, have some opinions, take these, like tell these people." And it's not like anything against James Shire or anybody. It's just like these people are coming from an academic background, and you can see it in the way that the report is written. That they're just carefully weighing things. There's an argument being made, but there's no like opinionated stance, right? Like you don't have me being like a dumb ogre, like just smashing shit.
What would you have liked them to say?
Well, I think in I do really want to explore this discussion. We've had the conversation around predatory sparrow. I think I even was showing you my predatory sparrow tattoo right
Yes.
before we got on the stream. But I think predatory sparrow is one of the most important threat actors of our time, in that it's showing wartime cyber from a truly capable adversary. It's giving us our first signs of like genuine signaling. And when you say sort of cyber operations in wartime with an ethical consideration, um, to me the ethical consideration, it's more it's what they're highlighting in their own messaging. Predatory sparrow, when they did the gas pump attack, they highlighted that they could have bricked the systems, but instead they supposedly allegedly reported the ode to Ingenico, and they only took them down but didn't brick them permanently, which is not a small thing in a country that is using technology that it shouldn't have access to. And Ingenico doesn't even have a seller relationship with the Iranians anymore. So all this hardware is either illicitly gotten or super fucking old. And you have similar instances around all the stuff that was done by Predatory Sparrow and Adalat Ali, which hacked the Evan prison cameras and whatnot. Those two have not been, as the report claims, those two have not been conclusively linked, but I put them all under the Meteor Express cluster because the malware, even in the videos that were being shown of Evan prison, the malware functions exactly the same way as what we saw in Meteor Express, just with a different type of iconography. They also, I think, make a really important link that had not been discussed at length, which is Predatory Sparrow does some um, propaganda campaigning in Iran around the supreme leader and sort of threats against the supreme leader. And there's like some suggestions of iconography and whatnot relating to the MEK. And the MEK is this group that's considered the Iranians consider a terrorist organization that is being housed largely in Albania, and that's what causes the Albanian ransomware situation where the whole government gets ransomware. It was like this whole giant crisis, and it was fake ransomware by the Iranians that used the logo that references the Predatory Sparrow logo. So in a way, it's funny to see like you have this operation from the Predatory Sparrow guys. They hint at collaboration with the MEK, the Iranians turn around and just smack the Albanians that have nothing to do with this shit. And you have this sort of like collateral damage along the way. But anyways, the ethical considerations thing to me is the same argument as the signaling argument we had a few episodes back, where it's like you clearly can do way worse and you're choosing not to. And what we see with the Iranians is largely the inverse. They seem to be trying to do as much damage as they can, but they don't seem to be able to do nearly enough. And in some situations, they have really tried, like the water pumps in Israel, where you're like, hey, are you gonna poison people? Like if you try to fuck with some of these water stations. But it's an inverse relationship between willingness to cause damage and ability to cause damage that's sort of inverted between the two scenarios that we're discussing right now.
Why are we so sure, Costin, that it's a hacktivist group? I mean, they're being described as really technical proficiency beyond that of typical hacktivist group. Like, how are we so sure that this is not a nation state APT?
Well, I'm confident it's a nation state. I don't think it's a hacktivist. Whoever says it's a hacktivist is probably just speculating, lying to themselves, or on purpose.
Being academic.
Or being academic, yeah. So I'm confident it's a nation state.
Can we do a quick magic money segment, Costin? Because you mentioned the link between Google quantum computer, and people are being afraid that this is going to steal their bits, and like it's being linked to Bitcoin dipping below 100,000 back to 96,000. People are saying, "Oh my God, Google quantum is going to fix that." It sounds like gibberish to me. Fill in the folks on what's happening in your land, Mr. Costin.
Well, it's an interesting story, and I think there's probably if our civilization is going to end, it's probably going to be due to 4 possible reasons.
Bitcoin is the first one.
Yeah, Bitcoin, AI, quantum computing, and bacon. And I'm not sure about the bacon, but it's like so good that you can't stop eating it. So eventually, bad things is gonna happen. But yeah, like going back to the quantum computing. I think it's kind of the dawn of the race. The same way that AI is now almost established, quantum is following shortly. And my feeling is that Google has been falling behind with their AI things. I mean, I've tried to use Google AI recently on those documents from the Romanian intelligence services. I remember that we played with ChatGPT and Claude, and I also tried them in the Google thingy.
Gemini.
Gemini, correct. Somehow it feels that they are like falling behind. Everyone is talking about ChatGPT. Everyone is talking about Gemini. Not so many people are talking about Gemini.
You mean people are talking about Claude and ChatGPT,
correct,
not Gemini,
correct,
right?
Not Gemini, correct. But if you're using Gemini and you think please let us know. Like, please let us know in the comments. I
think you can't avoid using Gemini, though. If you do a basic Google search, Gemini is the top. I mean, you're using Gemini.
You're not using it. It's being
anyways.
forced upon you. Like it's a shitty summary that's being added to everything that you didn't ask for. And now they announced Gemini in chat and stuff. You're like, I didn't ask.
But that's
for
the people's experience with Gemini. You're actually seeing it now if you run a Google search, right?
I think the only cool thing with Google AI that I've seen where people are like, oh my God, Google AI is doing something other people are not doing was like that notebook LM thing where you could, and I really wanted it. I really wanted to use it to prep for the podcast at some point because I do really well, right? Like I've been having issues with my eyes for about a year and a half, and like they're getting better now, but I was having an issue like consuming a lot of text, so I've turned to like audio. So I would 3x books and like just kind of run through podcasts and I've tried like every text to speech thing I could find. So I was hoping Notebook LM would be the one to do it. And it, of course, in true Google fashion, you can only upload like I think like 20 reports, and you go, oh, this could have been really cool. But
there's another really good one. There's another one called Illuminate. Illuminate.google.com. It transforms like deep technical arXiv papers into podcasts, and you can generate like deep rich, and it's pretty good. So don't knock Google's on some of their experiments that they're showing. They're also showing some Chrome browser plugins that will do some pretty interesting browsing and stuff for you. So
I'm knocking Google. I would like to knock Google in a comprehensive way, which is to say, it's really cool when you see them doing things that are actually like consumer things, like what you just mentioned with this Illuminate and Notebook LM and everything, where you go, that's a cool use of AI that we hadn't considered, and it's great that you've put this forth. I get annoyed at them because I know what Google's scale is actually like and what it's like for them to like turn shit out. And it annoys me that instead of being able to do like mega scale AI shit using Google's infrastructure, I am instead artificially limited to like, well, we only let you do 20, and you go, thank you, fuck you, like, you know, that you could have helped, and instead you set an artificial limitation. Why I say I want to fuck with them more, like I want to knock them more comprehensively, is I am genuinely baffled by the sickness in Google's culture that has made it so a technology that they invented, that they patented, that Jeff Dean was the one to put the first papers out on and like innovated in, is what is destroying their whole business model. And the best they can do is make a podcast from time to time and add it to like Google Sheets where there's no button and you can't find it, right? Like it's just, it makes no fucking sense.
Can I remind you guys that this is the Magic Money segment?
Oh, sorry. My bad. Costin,
Not to disappoint the Magic Money people, but
give
I
the
think
people what
everyone
they want.
is jumping these days between these topics: Magic Money,
Costin,
AI,
the point you were trying
aliens.
to make is Google
No,
doing
I was
this.
saying they're under pressure. They
It's
are
you,
about
under
you think this
bacon.
pressure
is
to
It's about
innovate.
bacon.
And bacon, yeah. But they're
Sorry.
for sure under a lot of pressure to show some innovation, to show some kind of an edge over the competition. And in this sphere of quantum computers, I guess there's like on one hand there's the Chinese who constantly, you know, if you look at the top supercomputers in the world, the vast majority are in China. If you look at the top quantum computers in the world, the majority of them are in China. So China is doing like a lot in this field. The Canadians are also playing in this field. There's Google and there's IBM, basically. And Google is trying to show some kind of an edge and innovation. And unfortunately, I think over the last years, this doesn't seem to be happening. So they did claim quantum supremacy a couple of years ago. Which means essentially they have a chip that is able to solve a problem way faster than conventional machines can. But that has been invalidated when researchers found another way of solving the same problem on regular computers. So what Google did, they built a test, a specialized test called random circuit sampling, a benchmark, if you want. And they said, like, here's this benchmark, and everyone over the world, like, see how well you can actually do in this particular benchmark. And they come up with a chip that actually is very good at that particular benchmark. And now here's the catch here is that that particular benchmark has no practical world use. So it's for practical things, it's useless. So they do have a chip which is very good in the test, but I think that was Vitalik Buterin with a really brutal reply to that original announcement. And he asked a very simple question, like, what is the bigger integer that you can factorize with this chip? And it was like no reply. Because if the biggest integer you can factorize is 100 bits or 200 bits, it means nothing. So in practice, this chip, quantum chip from Google, has 100 qubits. Now, if you want to factor, to break encryption, basically, to break Bitcoin, what you need is, people say, okay, in theory, 4,000 or 5,000 qubits, in practice, a million qubits. And the problem is that the more qubits you have, the more unstable the whole thing. Just imagine a house of cards. The more cards you put on that, the more unstable the whole thing becomes. And what Google is saying here is that their chip is particularly resistant to this noise. So the chips can be, in a way, improved further so that you can couple a larger bunch of them together, and in the end they can solve quantum problems. But for now, like, yeah, your magic monies are safe. They can't break encryption. And as someone was saying, if Google has a computer capable of doing this kind of crazy things, your magic money are essentially the last thing that you need to worry about. There's other things, bigger things that you need to worry first, and the magic money not first, essentially. So just like a summary of all that. What I thought, by the way,
sorry, Costin, if I understand you correctly, like at 100 qubits, if they can, like if I heard that correctly, right? If they can factorize 100 qubits with one chip, and we need 1 million for a practical attack. You're looking at they need 10,000 chips in theory if this is supposed to make some kind of like foundation that they can actually use to compute anything meaningful.
Yeah, something like that. But the issue is that the moment you start connecting the chips together, then you introduce all these coherence problems and errors, and everything collapses. So the
Right.
results are can no longer be trusted. You need to run the process many times and make sure, like just to verify the results, and then you run it so many times that it's no longer time effective.
It is the whole point here. Like, I agree with you that like Google has to show, like, look at what I
Yeah.
just said right before this, right? Like, I'm shitting all over them because they invented AI and they're not putting it to any kind of use
Correct.
They do
that's
not care about you,
meaningful.
bro.
I
Transform it, right?
they do not care about me. Yeah. I mean, they figured out so much of this stuff, and like TensorFlow and all that, it's all coming from them. And look at the companies that are thriving even on the hardware side, right? Like Grok, the right Grok, right, with a
They're
Q
running on
instead of a
NVIDIA.
K. Yeah, no.
Oh.
Sorry, and this is why I wanted to make that distinction, right? There's a naming collision here that fucking sucks. There's the Grok AI that shitter or Twitter or X or whatever you want to call them has been peddling. I'm not talking about that. There's a chip company called Grok. I met the CEO at some point, Jonathan something. He came from Google, and like when they were making all the special hardware for TensorFlow and whatever, he left, started his own company, and they make these TPUs, like specific, like purpose-built chips for ML. And they're excellent, right? Like some of the fastest models are running on this sort of Grok stuff. It's just to say, right? Google came up with the hardware, came up with the software, came up with the paradigm, didn't use it for anything. Now, what we're talking about, if I understand you correctly, on quantum, because it's not an area that I'm fascinated by the possibility. It just always seemed way too early stage for me to like really have any kind of place to sink my teeth into. But they kind of have to redevelop all like computational, like foundational computational thinking to make this new type of computer work, right? Like we're away from binary, like zeros and ones and single state to like multiple states underlying the thing, and you have to refigure out algorithms and refigure out what it means to do efficient computing. So like I can see why they would make a test like this, where they want, what the nerds want to claim is, hey, on a hardware basis, we figured out some efficient shit that the rest of you have not figured out. Our thing is objectively better. And what everybody's saying, yeah, that's cool, but you can't use it for anything meaningful, like anything. Like nothing you are suggesting is actually practical. And then they don't say anything in return. And it's the most googly shit I've ever heard, right? Like, we made up a standardized test and we fucking aced it. And you go, okay, and they go, we won. Like,
Stand up,
okay.
let the people see your shirt.
But they do care about their chips.
I mean, what I want the backside of this shirt to say is Google doesn't care about, like the front says Google doesn't care about your feelings. I want the back to say you shouldn't care about Google's feelings. Like we're all just sort of coddling this shit.
All right, we're past the 2 hour mark, and this might have been our.
I
Listen,
stopped
there's
Costin.
hope. There's
Costin
hope.
has more to say.
No, there's hope, and I think we need to end in a hopeful note.
Go, Costin. Close the show for me.
There is
Episode
hope.
4. Come on, man.
In the Google blog, they actually talk about the fact that they think, or they believe that why does all this quantum magic actually work? The magic quantum computing, it works because people think that every time you make a choice, there's a new kind of universe being spawned, in which you make the choice, and there's another universe which gets spawned in which you didn't make that choice. So it means there's an infinity of universes everywhere for every single possible choice in your life, your computer, and so on. And to solve problems, the real magic here is just to navigate this labyrinth of universes and find the universe in which you find the solution in the first try. So whatever, like you're rolling a dice or you're rolling like 100 dices, and just it takes only one try for you to find that solution, or like a very small number of tries. So the moment you find the path in the labyrinth to that universe, like problem solved. So just to
I
end
am
in a
not high enough
positive
for this
note,
conversation.
if
I
Google
am.
and their chips can find the path through this labyrinth to the point where there's like the solution, I
It's
think
too
we
early.
as a
I am
civilization and as a humanity can find the path out of all this
can I
Thank you,
land it
Costin.
back
Thing.
away from the hopefulness of this?
To
Do
a
you
positive
understand
future.
how did the quantum people, the quantum computing people come up with a paradigm that has even more hubris built into it than AI, right? Like AI claims that we're building our own God, our own AGI. Like the hubris of humanity to think that we can rebuild God with some fucking graphics cards. And then, but the quantum people were like, hold my beer. Every time we run a computation, we spawn multiple universes to answer our stupid fucking math question. And the idea, like, you didn't go many worlds theory in the way that you would normally describe it in like formal, analytical, formal logic and philosophy, which is the worlds exist as possibilities already, and there's like jumping, like agential jumping between them. The quantum computing people were like, no, fuck that. The worlds don't exist until we
We spawn
decide
them.
we want to like multiply some numbers. And then we are so foundational to this universe that our little questions, our tiny thoughts, spawn entire other universes to complete calculations. It's fucking wild.
This is such a three-body problem. Go read the book, people.
Read some fucking books.
It's what Penrose has been saying for many years, that our brains are actually working through quantum effects. And I think it's been proven recently that the brains do operate at quantum level. And in essence, the conscience is a quantum process. Your determinism and your thoughts, they do spawn new universes.
On that
When
note, my next book that I'm interested in audibling is called The Impossible Man, and it is a biography of Roger Penrose that I've heard is very good. So,
Fantastic.
Roger Penrose is a genius, an
he
amazing
is a
person.
fucking genius. Yeah.
Costin, close the show with some shout-outs, please.
You shout people out, man.
Shoutouts
I don't know.
to Stephen Wolfram for his new theories in physics. Like he's trying to put together, let's say, something new in physics. I think it's quite funny that one of the Google guys, famous Demis Hassabis from DeepMind, got the Nobel Prize for his work in protein folding. So I thought that was quite impressive for a Google employee to get the Nobel. So shout out to people like that. Shout out to people who work at solving deep mysteries of the universe. And don't forget the bacon.
Do you know I had a friend who used to buy pork belly futures as part of an investment strategy because he figured if he lost all his money, he could still eat the bacon at the end of it. So
No, because you're just paying. You're investing in the futures. I don't think you can actually get that. Just lowering everyone's costs of bacon.
Juanito, closing shout-outs?
I mean, if Stephen Wolfram is listening to this, it would be great if he could reduce the size of his fucking books. I bought the New Science thinking I was gonna get so smart, and it's somehow bigger. It's bigger than Gödel Escher Bach, which I've been telling myself I'm gonna read for like 15 fucking years, and I've yet to be able to like get past the first page. This thing is twice the size of that. I could kill someone just throwing Stephen Wolfram's The New Science across the room, except I'm too weak to lift it off my desk.
He is not one of our 53 listeners. So could you
Whoa,
please give
I mean,
me a better
never
shout-out?
know. We never know.
We never know. Well, shout out to HushCon fam, which is the reason I'm in Seattle. I'm actually missing the first talk right now, so thanks guys. Shout out to these guys. They've been running this for longer than I know, and it's always been a really great conference, and it's been an interest. I love the private conferences that allow people to come out and say shit that needs to be said. I've seen talks at HushCon that that people were fired for at other conferences, but not at HushCon. It's nice to be able to see that. So I'm looking forward to kind of bringing, I guess, the second part of my LabsCon keynote to this audience and seeing how that plays out.
Could you mention the
Yeah.
podcast so we get a couple of listeners as well?
I don't know, man. I don't know if I'm
And I'll close
ready
the show.
to whore out.
Let me close this show by encouraging everyone to go read Maya Koksarowski's piece on what sucks in security. It's a research findings from 50 plus security leaders. I'll put a link in the show description. I think it was the most important thing people can read, whether you're in marketing, whether you're in VC land, whether you're a startup founder, regardless of what you do. It really documents exactly what sucks in security, the top issues, access management, vulnerability management, SaaS logs, some of the things we talk about here nonstop. Shout out to Maya for putting that out. And with that, thank you, everyone. We'll catch you again next week.
Ciao.
Thanks, everyone.